They spent $300,000 on a wedding, but when I begged them to help save my daughter's life, they turned away like I was asking for a loan, not their granddaughter's future. My name is Adelaide, and I'm 31 years old. I live in the Pacific Northwest, where the rain speaks more truths than my own parents ever did. I run a modest interior design studio, nothing flashy, but enough to keep food on our table and hope in our home. My husband, Gavin, is the kind of man who listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, it's the kind of voice you believe in. Our daughter, Sienna, is 8. She was born with her father's quiet soul and my fierce heart, and she is the reason I learned just how brutal blood can be, and just how beautiful family can become when you choose it instead of inherit it. This story isn't a cry for sympathy. It's a reckoning, one that started with a diagnosis, escalated with a party, and ended in a conference room with a suitcase full of cash and a goodbye so final it echoed for weeks. You can walk away from the people who raised you, and sometimes it's the only way to survive. I was born into a family where love wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. Growing up in a glossy house with marble countertops and matching holiday outfits, people on the outside thought we were perfect. My mother, Evelyn, was the social queen of our neighborhood. Her laugh could turn heads at charity galas, and her wardrobe always smelled faintly of roses and wealth. My father, Richard, owned a chain of home furnishing stores, Monarch Living, where everything was cream-colored, overpriced, and aggressively elegant. They had built a kingdom of appearances, but what they built inside that house wasn't a home. It was a stage, and I was never part of the main cast. That role belonged to my younger brother, Jasper, 2 years younger, infinitely more adored. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would skim my report card and mutter, "That's what's expected." But when Jasper managed a B- in economics, there'd be champagne, cake, balloons. "Our boy's doing big things," Dad would say, his hand clapping Jasper's shoulder like he'd won the Nobel Prize. I used to think I was imagining the imbalance, that maybe if I just tried harder, they'd see me. But by 13, I stopped waiting for applause. I got my first job shelving books at a local library. I loved the smell of paper, the silence between the aisles. No one told me to sit straighter or smile more. I saved every penny to buy my own SAT prep books. I applied for college without guidance, filled out my FAFSA in the school counselor's office, while Jasper was off snowboarding on a mental health break. I got into a strong interior architecture program. When I told my parents, my mom pursed her lips and said, "That field is crowded. You'll need to grow thicker skin." Meanwhile, Jasper's acceptance into a local business certificate course sparked a rooftop party with a catered taco truck and a family Facebook announcement that read, "Our future CEO." I kept my head down. I learned how to carry disappointment without letting it show. I paid for school through scholarships and late-night shifts in the campus cafe. Every victory I had was quiet, tucked between exhaustion and resilience. And I told myself, once I built my own life, my own version of home, it wouldn't matter anymore. And for a while, it didn't. After college, I started Adelaide Design Company out of a shared workspace, sandwiched between a frozen yogurt bar and a tattoo parlor. I painted my first office walls myself. 2 coats, soft sage green. I couldn't afford a real assistant, so I used my phone alarm as a meeting scheduler. I had to beg for my first clients, but I never missed a deadline. It was during one of those early projects, staging a starter apartment for a young couple, that I met Gavin. He was installing smart lighting systems, quiet, focused, kind. He asked if I believed lighting could affect your mood. I said yes. How we light a room often tells us how to feel in it. He smiled and said, "That's what I've always thought too." A year later, we were married. Our wedding was held at a public garden, under a sky that threatened rain, but held out just long enough. No string quartet, no custom monogrammed cocktails. Just us, wildflowers, and vows we wrote by hand. My parents didn't come. My mom said it was too short notice, and my father claimed he was booked for a networking retreat. But Gavin's parents, Miriam and Walter, were there. They brought folding chairs, a basket of muffins, and hearts wide enough to hold us both. Then came Sienna. From the moment I held her, I understood what love was supposed to feel like. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her eyes searching for mine, like she already knew I'd protect her from everything, even the shadows I still carried. She grew up in a small apartment where sunlight spilled through the kitchen window and laughter echoed off secondhand furniture. We didn't have much, but we had love in all the places it mattered. And for a time, I believed that was enough. Until I learned what love wasn't. Again. It started with a cough. At first, it was just a small dry sound, something I brushed off as the tail end of a seasonal cold. Sienna had always been a strong kid, bounding through the living room in her mismatched socks, reading aloud to her stuffed animals like they were scholars. So, when the cough didn't go away, I told myself it was allergies, maybe a lingering bug. I gave her honey and warm tea, rubbed her back as she slept, but it didn't go away. It got worse. The cough came in fits, waking her in the night. I'd find her sitting up in bed, clutching her little chest, eyes wide with panic. Gavin and I rushed her to a clinic, where a doctor prescribed antibiotics and said it was likely bronchitis. But the way he furrowed his brow over her chart haunted me. "Monitor her closely," he said, "and come back if it gets worse." It got worse. She started sleeping more, reading less. She didn't dance around the apartment anymore. One afternoon, she was coloring at the table when she suddenly dropped her crayon and whispered, "Mommy, my heart feels too fast." Then she fainted. That moment fractured me. We sped to the hospital, Gavin white-knuckling the steering wheel, while I held Sienna in the back seat, whispering, "You're okay, baby, you're okay," over and over, as if saying it would make it true. The ER was a blur of cold light and louder fear. Blood tests, scans, machines. A waiting room full of silence. 3 hours later, a doctor walked in with a clipboard and eyes that had seen too much. "There's a mass in her left lung," he said. "It's likely benign, but it's compressing her airway. She needs surgery, soon." He gave us the number. $98,000, not including post-op care. I couldn't breathe. We had no insurance. We kept saying next month, after every tight budget, every time the premiums felt too steep. And now, the price of our delay was life-threatening. We had about $11,000 in savings. The bank turned us down for a loan. Our credit score wasn't high enough. Desperation clawed at my throat. I did what I'd sworn I never would. I called my mother. It was late. She answered in a clipped tone, like I was interrupting something delicate. I told her everything. Sienna's diagnosis, the urgency, the cost. She paused. Then she said, "This is terrible timing, Adelaide. Your father and I are hosting Jasper's engagement party next weekend. We've already paid deposits." I blinked, stunned. "Mom, Sienna could die." "I'm sorry," she said coldly, "but we can't let personal issues overshadow a major family celebration. You know how that would look." I stood in the hospital corridor, my daughter hooked up to machines, while my mother talked about venue lighting and caterers. And then she hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside Sienna, watching the rise and fall of her chest, terrified that at any moment it might stop. The next morning, I made the hardest decision I'd ever made. I drove across town to my parents' estate. It was exactly what you'd expect from two people obsessed with image. Manicured lawns, white columns, warm champagne laughter pouring from the backyard. The engagement party was already in full swing. I walked past luxury cars and crystal platters, clutching Sienna's medical records like armor. Inside, my mother turned and froze. Her smile evaporated. "Adelaide," she hissed, "what are you doing here?" "I need 5 minutes," I said. "It's Sienna." Her eyes narrowed. "Not now. This is Jasper's day." I forced the papers into her hand. "She needs surgery. Please, help us. You're her grandmother." Her face turned to stone. "We've spent everything already. Between the band, the dress, the photographers. Where do you expect me to find $98,000? I stepped back like she'd slapped me. My father walked over, confused, holding a champagne flute. I turned to him, voice trembling. Dad, please. He looked around at the guests and said, "Don't make a scene." Behind him, Jasper laughed. "What? Didn't budget for emergencies? Don't make that our problem, Addie." That was when something in me broke. Not from sadness, but clarity. I stood straighter. I looked at the three of them. My brother with his smirk, my father with his cowardice, my mother with her eyes full of judgment. And I realized I would never be their priority. Not even when it mattered most. And Sienna deserved more than their silence. So I turned and walked out of their world. And I never looked back. When I left that party, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. Something had cracked open in me. Not grief, not rage. Something quieter but far more permanent. Resolve. Back at the hospital, Sienna's face was pale against the sheets, her little chest rising with effort. Gavin sat beside her, his hand around hers, whispering stories she was too weak to answer. I told him everything. The party, the refusal, the looks on their faces when I begged for our daughter's life. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled me close. "We'll find a way," he said. "We don't need them. We never did." We sold everything we could. Gavin listed his old pickup truck, the one we'd driven across Oregon during our honeymoon, laughing under starlight, singing along to songs we barely knew. I sold my laptop, my design tablet, our couch, even the coffee table we'd repainted together on a rainy Saturday. Every object held a memory. And we let them go, piece by piece. In 3 days, we raised $29,000. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A spark in the dark. I created a crowdfunding page. I shared Sienna's photo, her gap-toothed smile, her bright eyes dimmed by illness. I wrote from the heart, told the truth without begging. And slowly, strangers began to share it. There were people who offered prayers. Some sent $5, $10. One message came from a woman named Lydia in Tennessee. "I'm a single mom too. I know what it's like to feel helpless. It's not much, but I hope it helps." Her $5 donation felt like a lifeline. Then came the people I hadn't expected. Anna, my old college roommate, wired $500 with a note. "This is all my rent buffer, but she's worth it. You're worth it." I cried so hard I couldn't speak for 10 minutes. Travis, a junior designer at my firm, 23, shy, brilliant, showed up at the hospital. He slipped an envelope into my hand. "It's $320, he said. "I was saving for a new laptop, but Sienna comes first." I had never cried in front of a coworker, until that moment. And then, like Grace, Gavin's parents came. Miriam and Walter were not wealthy. They lived in a modest rambler with creaky floors and a fireplace that smelled like childhood. They had always treated me like their own, but I never expected what they did. Walter pulled me aside in the hospital corridor, his voice low, his eyes clear. "We sold the house," he said. "It's done. The money's yours." I blinked, stunned. "What?" "We've already moved in with my sister for now," Miriam added. "Sienna's family. Family shows up." I crumpled. Not with shame, but with gratitude so overwhelming I couldn't breathe. I sobbed into Miriam's arms as Walter held Gavin, both men silent in the way only fathers who have lost and feared can be. That night, I sat by Sienna's bed, her tiny fingers curled around mine, and whispered, "You're not going anywhere, baby. We've got you." 3 days later, we had the full amount. $98,000 and change, paid in cash, in kindness, in love from people who had no obligation to give, but gave anyway. The surgery lasted 6 hours, 6 hours of pacing hallways, of holding Gavin's hand until our fingers went numb, of clutching Sienna's beaded necklace against my heart like it was holy. When the doctor walked out, his mask lowered and a small smile on his face, I collapsed into the chair behind me. "She's strong," he said. "She'll recover." I wept, not because I was afraid, but because the fear had finally released me, because we had pulled her back from the edge, because love, real love, had shown up. The weeks after were a blur of healing, physically, emotionally, financially. We scraped by. I returned to work half days. Gavin picked up consulting gigs at night. Every breath Sienna took was a reminder that every sacrifice had been worth it. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I didn't want survival anymore. I wanted growth, power, safety. I wanted a future where Sienna would never have to beg anyone to see her worth. So I got up earlier. I restructured my company. I studied marketing, negotiation, digital strategy. I took classes online at midnight while Sienna slept. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. And people noticed. Clients started referring friends. Former clients returned. Projects got bigger. My name began to circulate in Denver design groups, then in regional blogs. A year later, I signed a 7-figure contract to redesign the interiors of a luxury apartment complex. Modern Spaces magazine ran a feature. Adelaide Kerr, from crisis to creative powerhouse. When they asked what fueled my success, I said it plainly. My daughter almost died. I begged for help. My family said no. But the people who mattered, the ones who didn't have to help, they said yes. I built this for them. The interview went viral. Not for the design tips, but for the truth. And suddenly, the family that had always ignored me couldn't look away anymore. The interview had barely been live for a day when the ripple began. Within hours, people pieced together who I was. Adelaide Kerr, formerly Adelaide Monroe, daughter of Richard and Evelyn Monroe, sister to Jasper. The same Monroe family who ran Monarch Living. The same family who, as headlines soon screamed, threw a 6-figure engagement party and refused to help their dying granddaughter. Their names trended for all the wrong reasons. Review sites for their furniture chain were flooded with 1-star ratings. Photos from the engagement party were plastered next to screenshots from my interview, and people connected the dots faster than I could have imagined. My story wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. Within a month, Monarch Living closed 3 showrooms. Lawsuits followed. Suppliers cut ties. Jasper's fiancée erased every photo of him from her socials, canceled the wedding, and moved out. And my parents, who once dined with mayors and moguls, were suddenly publicly shamed. And then they came crawling. It was a letter mailed to my studio, the handwriting shaky, the tone desperate. We lost everything, it read. The house, the business. Jasper has no job. Please, Adelaide, help us. I sat with that letter for hours. I thought of Sienna in that hospital bed, her gasping breaths, their cold refusal. I invited them to my office just once. They arrived in worn coats, silent and smaller than I remembered. I placed a suitcase on the table, $200,000, enough to help, enough to start over. But before they could reach for it, I said, "From this moment on, we are no longer family. You'll take this money and walk away. No visits, no calls, no more." My mother sobbed. My father stared at the floor. Neither protested. Because deep down, they knew, family is not blood, it's action. And they had made their choice long ago. I never heard from them again. No more letters, no late-night phone calls. Just silence, exactly as I asked for. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I healed, not in one sweeping moment, but gradually, like light slipping through cracks in a boarded-up window. Like breath returning after a long submersion. I woke up each morning to Sienna's footsteps padding across the floor, to Gavin's hand wrapped around mine. The house was filled with simple things: warm food, quiet laughter, the rustle of pages turning during bedtime stories. Peace didn't come from forgetting. It came from choosing what to carry forward. We eventually moved into a new home, one I helped design from the ground up. It wasn't flashy, but it had wide windows, sunlit walls, and a big yard where Sienna chased fireflies until nightfall. Miriam planted lavender along the fence. Walter taught Sienna how to ride a bike, steady hands on her back, steady love in every word. I repaid those who had shown up. I helped Anna launch the music school she once dreamed of. I funded Travis's scholarship to a top design institute. I gave back, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Because love given freely should echo. I thought for a long time that family was something fixed, something you're born into, like your blood type or your eye color. But it's not. Family is who shows up when it matters, who holds your hand when the world falls apart, who sells their house without hesitation to save a child they didn't raise, but loved anyway. One day, Sienna asked me why we didn't visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore. I paused, then told her the truth. Simple, not bitter. Because not everyone who shares your name shares your heart, and we only keep the ones who do. She nodded, her little hand in mine, and said, "I'm glad we have the good kind." "Me too, baby, me too."